Yes, all right, so we're gonna call the meeting to order at 6 o'clock. Erin is the usual timekeeper, but she's gonna be a little bit late and she's gonna be zooming. Anyone else?
I can do it.
Great, thanks.
You got it.
Okay, so Kristen Boyd, the minute take by the timekeeper. And Nikki is here. Hey, Nikki.
Reassignment.
All right, so, hey, Steve. Starting off with public comment, and I don't believe we have everybody. So we'll move on. So we have an action item to approve the agenda. And I feel like there was maybe
Things added to it.
something. I did say I had 2 things to add.
I thought so.
Yes.
In your notes.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at the different notes, right? Yes, so E and F, board highlights and monitoring reports. So those would go under board management and governance. Does anyone have anything else that they're thinking about in the agenda? Let's go here. Okay, so then I'll have a motion to approve the agenda with those 2 additions, E and F, under board management and governance.
So moved.
Kristen Toy, and a second.
I'll second. Sarah.
Okay, all those in favor of the agenda with the amendments? Say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, moving right along.
Kristen and Sarah.
But who, did somebody oppose or?
Oh, no, I think that was Brad, just.
It's just a delayed aye.
Okay.
Okay, we need a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Steve Rudy, and a second.
I'll second. Sarah.
Sarah and Carl. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the consent agenda is passed. All right, so we're gonna move on to executive limitations monitoring. And I think I mentioned in the chair notes that since we don't have any monitoring reports due and this school year is about to be underway, we thought it might be a good time for Patrick to update us on a few different things. So, but first we have a financial report update. So we'll start with that. Does anybody have any questions about that report? Steve?
So Floyd, this is the 6:30. I know this is unaudited, but this is kind of maybe the snapshot.
It's
kind of
pretty
thing.
close to fully audited. Our auditors have left the building. So we think we're pretty close for this one.
Okay. I was just kind of looking at assuming in the expenditure column on the right-hand side, the budget variance, that's kind of sort of how we hit or miss for the
Yep.
most part.
Yep.
And the first one, 1,100, is looks like we were in the good $403,000 and change. Direct
Correct,
instruction. But if I go to 1,100 on the actual details. And the sum of that category looks like we were in the red by 279,000. So I was kind of having trouble going back and forth between the detail and the wrap up.
Sorry, I'm just a little behind you.
Yeah,
Almost there.
ambush you just as you walked in.
Well, that'll teach you to be late.
I know, we're a tight ship here, Floyd.
So I was amazed. I walked in, holy cow.
He was trying to beat me too.
Mm.
And it looks like the 403 is the balance without encumbrance, so it almost looks like the encumbrance isn't reflected in the wrap up. You see where I'm at?
I'm seeing it, yeah, the balance showing the 403. With another encumbrance. Pushing it to the other side. And that encumbrance is coming out of the salaries for professional staff.
Anyway, it almost
Yeah, let
looked
me
like, it almost looked
clarify
like,
if that's, if that just hasn't, if it's the summer salaries that haven't funded.
For
yeah, well, and I was sort of having trouble with some other, like 1,200 was the same issue. Central office is 2,500, I had the same issue, 2,200 instructional support services. It almost looked like the detail had been put together, but it hadn't been reflected in the summary page.
I'll clarify that in the morning and see if I
Right.
may be able to pull it up tonight before we move along.
Okay. So, I mean, assuming that we can take the summary page at face value, the thing that looks like the big whack is still the construction project. It was a little bit hard to tell without that being sort of pulled out of the picture, how we did otherwise.
So if I were to show the lobby project, bathroom project carved out of that, would be helpful info on top.
Yeah, like maybe in your notes at the end.
Sure.
Just kind of like, here's how we did, without that blip.
Yep,
And it looks like you solidified what the final
what the final
change order is
move
gonna
is,
be.
yeah.
So the fourth, again, just assuming that the summary page is clean. What we might be looking at, and I don't know, Patrick, was this, you didn't plug this reserve number, I mean, this fund balance into any of the retreat
No,
information, right? But that number might be somewhere around 438. 438,000, is that the top number?
the 438 is what was voted out of 22.
Out of 22.
So
Oh,
that's,
right,
that's
right.
a done
Yeah,
number,
do you have a rough feeling for what 23 is gonna be?
0.
0.
That's the
That's-
goal, is to not take any more out of reserves than we have to. Because then you have to deal with it back into reserves. So that was the reason for the up to on the vote,
Oh, for the
for
capital.
moving out of the, out of reserves.
Okay, so
And
we're
by-
basically gonna,
Yeah,
we're
we're gonna try and
basically
watch
gonna
it,
zero it out
Mhm.
using the,
rather than carry any sort, rather than bring a balance out of reserve to then put back into reserves next March.
the
Let's leave it in there and just go with the 0.
The only reason it would make any sense is if you wanted to pull money essentially out of the capital reserve to put into the ed reserve. That would be a strategy you could use to draw more out, create a fund balance that you then have to decide what to do with. And you would be able to either return to voters, put in the ed reserve, or put in the capital reserve.
Okay,
And our practice hasn't been to return to voters because
right,
there are needs.
but there might be some discussion later on, even in this meeting, about the need to bulk up the ed reserve.
There's some conversation on that.
Maybe,
issues or no?
Less prepared for this meeting, but yeah, in a future meeting, looking at ESSER funds going away and what will we keep and what will not stay around because the funds are gone and how might we tap into the ed reserve?
Right. But
And
that would
ed
sort of
reserve's
be-
in a
that
pretty
would
good
be sort
spot.
of- In order to accomplish that, it sounds like we would have to. We'd have to pull more money out of the capital reserve. Which. Doesn't really follow the purpose of capital reserve.
Right.
Right,
Yeah,
Okay.
you would be pulling money out of the capital reserve essentially for the purpose of creating a fund balance to then decide what to do with later.
Yeah, that sounds
Cumbersome.
dubious.
Dubious.
Yeah.
So if I understand the conversation that we overran the budget by $722K. We'll pull that out of capital reserve and apply it against that 4,700 number, which is 1904K. which would, in a sense, bring that line item back to original budget or close to it.
I didn't quite follow it. Sorry, Kevin.
So the total expenditures right now are negative $722K.
Right,
So I'm understanding we'll pull that out of capital reserve because we're allowed, we have a voter approval to do that.
we
Six.
do, but we're not gonna take the 722, because our revenue is a positive 105.7. So we'll use that to offset to bring us to 624.
Okay,
Conceptually, the same idea.
Same thing, just getting you to that negative 624. That's the number we're pulling out of reserves.
okay, and then you would in a sense apply that against the building improvement line.
Correct.
Yeah,
And that would draw
Okay.
that back down to more close to the budget, original budget line item.
what's the, so there's two numbers in parentheses floated at the bottom of that column that don't have a title.
Nothing.
And the 624, now I can follow that, I guess.
Yeah, the 616, those numbers should be the same.
I see.
I mean, that's the 616, I'm trying to bring it up here and I'm sorry.
Yep.
Is the variance expenditure to revenue. And then the 624 is the total dollars. So your variance should equal, they should just equal, they should balance, and they don't. They're off by $8,000 and there's just, you know, something we didn't carry correctly.
Okay. All right.
Working.
Well, you can see why I was curious about 1100 then,
Yeah, that's
because if we're really in the red, they're not 403 to the good, then that's a different equation. And 2200 right now looks like we're 460 to the good. And if I go,
Right,
and if I
and-
go to
and
the
that-
detail,
and that doesn't match up either.
yeah, it's still to the good, but it's not to the good as much.
Yes,
Right. And again, it looks like that's balance without encumbrance.
right.
So it almost looks like the sheets maybe a step behind the detail. The summary sheet's a step behind the detail.
I'm wondering in terms of next steps, so Floyd's about to leave early tomorrow morning for a much needed vacation, bringing kids to college, whirlwind tour. End of next week, early the following week, is that an okay time to get a clarification out on all those points?
Yeah,
I may have it a little quicker. I'm drafting a note here, between Tammy and I tomorrow, while I'm sitting in JFK. We may get to it.
All right, I was trying to give you a little,
Yeah.
You know, if I
I
can get it
think-
tomorrow, I'd rather not delay, so that's my
Well,
goal.
and
well, I mean, obviously, it's just.
What else? are you
We're gonna
do
start a
at
bunch, we're gonna
JFK?
start.
We've got 3 kids in college. It's not like I'm going into the city and spending any money.
Obviously, we're gonna start a budget discussion, we just. If we are at zero, if we got a bigger problem.
And will the finance committee, that committee will convene before our next full board meeting.
The first. The
Yeah,
second
September,
weekend of
right.
September,
So
second Tuesday, of September.
I don't know what on those agendas, but assuming there'll be some preliminary budget conversations with that group first.
yeah,
Yeah.
and my initial thinking is that as we look at this, if there needs to be a correction, there's still a path to get to zero, given the voter approval to tap into the capital reserve. It's just
Right, we
we
won't
take
be
more
anything
capital
less
reserve to
zero.
bring us to zero.
Well, I guess the question is, the capital reserve vote was to make good on cost overrun.
Right.
So is the 624 the actual cost overrun?
No, 624 is the balance of the budget. Over budget, the total over budget number.
It's a portion of the
Right.
cost overruns of the.
So we save money in other areas. to offset that, that overage on the construction line
You're paying for those overages.
through some of those savings.
I mean, you're paying, yeah, you're paying for the excess and change orders
Correct.
through other general funds.
Right. So to your point earlier about showing
You
that.
would simply
that-
shift that, take more out of capital reserve
Right.
to pay that.
It'll be clearer with the number of how much over net are we on the lobby project. To then compare that to the
The remainder.
remainder,
Yeah.
correct?
Okay,
So those three pieces will all kind of come together.
right. Okay, good.
Thank you for your diligence in looking at these. Steve.
Yeah,
Anyone
Steve will
else?
definitely follow up on the next subcommittee meeting of this, so.
Yeah, and that's probably the deadline, really. It's just make sure those folks have the.
Yeah.
Yep, and I've got some notes here on to what you brought up, so we'll be able to take care of that.
All right.
Thanks.
Love committees. Okay, if there's nothing else on that, then Patrick has a couple of items to share with us, so. Let's turn it over to you.
All right, so we'll start with staffing. So in addition to the usual, we need subs, we're hiring for ELP for the first after school session. We're already looking for spring athletic coaches. Those are sort of your usual positions that we're looking to fill. We have beyond that, we have about 20 openings as of right now. I'll get into what those are. But even in addition to those 20 openings, we have currently 7 FMLA leaves to start the fall, which is a relatively high number. So that creates different sort of holes to fill. There are different lengths for different reasons. There's no real pattern to it, just that there's a fair number of them, and 7. We also have about 19 people on provisional licenses starting this year. Which means they don't currently have all their license is not currently in place properly. So this provisional license buys them 2 years. So it's kind of it's a way to get somebody started. Assuming they are in a place where over the course of 2 years, they can take enough courses and do the work needed to get the proper license through the AOE. In recent years, we have had to have more people on provisionals. 19 is quite high. I don't know how that compares to other districts in the state, but I think it's a sign of the times. To have 19 provisionals and 20 openings is pretty significant. So getting to the 20 openings, 11 of those are in support staff. That's 2 behavior assistants, an administrative assistant, 6 educational assistants, and 2 facilities positions that we're looking to fill. So that makes up those 11. And the 9 licensed staff positions are, and there's definitely a theme here, 2 SLPs, so speech language pathologists, 1 school psychologist, a special educator, dean of students, director of safety, 2 social emotional learning interventionists, and a social emotional learning coach. So the theme there is student supports, right? And maybe even a greater emphasis on SEL needs.
Sorry, Patrick, you went through the support staff vacancies pretty quickly, but are many of them in student support as well?
Yeah, so 8 of the 11, I would say, sort of in that broad category of student support, 2 behavior assistants, and then 6 educational assistants. 3 of those educational assistant positions are what we're calling utility EAs.
General.
So those are ESSER funded positions that basically fill in where they need to be filled in when there's a vacancy and they need to step in and sub when we don't have enough subs. Or they help with student discipline, or they kind of go where they're needed on any given day. So 3 of those 6 educational assistants are those positions. And these are the current openings as of today. Some of these positions were in interview processes, so there's a good chance that we'll fill 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 or 5 of these positions. I think any more than that would be wishful thinking. And so the response when we are short-staffed is we look at kind of cobbling together whatever we can cobble together to sort of borrow supports from one place and kind of piece things together to try and prioritize student IEPs that we have, sort of that legal and moral obligation to make sure that we're fulfilling. And then kind of work from there to do our best to manage where there are holes.
I think Brad has a question.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, hi all. Sorry I'm not there. I had to run down to DC for a couple of days. Patrick, I was just kind of curious on the 19 provisionals. Who are these people? Are they younger teachers, new teachers, or can you say a little bit more about that?
I don't really have the statistics in front of me, but I would say it's a combination of not necessarily younger teachers, but I think people that are taking on positions they haven't held in the past. And so they don't have quite the proper endorsement. So some folks may be a licensed educator, but don't have the proper endorsement for the work that we're hiring them to do. So they have to take some courses and provide some evidence to the AOE to get the proper endorsement and have the proper licensure. Other folks, I'm thinking about some folks that were out of education for a while. And so their license lapsed and they're reinstituting their license, but that takes some time. So they get a provisional to buy time to do that. That's
Okay.
coming to mind for me. I don't know if you can think of others.
There's at least one that's from out of state, and so having a peer review from the Agency of Ed right now means get in line, so it just takes us a little time to get caught up with all of those. Imagine us compared to the whole entire state, so it's kind of a little bit of a backlog.
So would any of them be people that are making career changes, if you will, and going into education?
Could be,
And they
yeah.
have a background in engineering or something?
Yeah, I don't know if that applies specifically to this group. But we have had that in the past, where folks that have made a career change are coming in education and are close, but not quite there.
Yeah, the career center sees that a lot.
Yeah. But really, you have to be within 2 years. So to be able to be eligible for provisional, you have to put together a plan that shows how over the course of 2 years, you're gonna be able to meet the requirements for the proper endorsements.
Patrick, is one school more impacted than others by the openings?
I would say Bristol is probably the most impacted, though I think we have an okay plan to kind of piece things together there, in particular in the realm of special education. So the special educator that's missing really could be argued as 1.5 special educators is at Bristol. So we've had to sort of borrow some special educator time from Beeman to kind of help fill some need at Bristol. Under Act 173, we can be more flexible in how we use staff to meet IEP needs. So we have even more so this year, what we're calling general ed interventionists, working with groups of students that have services written into their IEPs. So it's a literacy interventionist, someone who's a specialist in literacy, supporting a student on an IEP that has a literacy need in their IEP. So it's still super high qualified, excellent instruction and support the student's getting, but it gives us a little more flexibility. Whereas prior to 173, more or less, special educators could only work with students on IEPs, and other educators essentially worked with students not on IEPs. So it was much more of a sort of compartmentalized approach to meeting student needs. This is a much better model and we're taking advantage of it. And thankfully that's helping to meet some of the needs. Where we're struggling is, and Beth can elaborate on this, but at Bristol in particular, the direct service needs are met because of this flexibility we have with how we're meeting student needs. But it pushes out the case management time that special educators need to really do the work that's required by law. So we've had some conversations with the union about exercising some language in the contract that enables us to allow special educators to spend their time during the school day providing direct service, and we'll compensate them for hours outside of the school day to do the case management. So folks have been flexible with that to help meet this need, and borrowing some time from other schools, and then the flexibility with the interventionists has been what we've been able to do to kind of piece this together. I don't know if you wanted to elaborate on that, any, Beth?
Yeah, I was just going to add that case management entails meetings, developing IEPs day to day in the building, stop everything and deal with situations of students. managing oftentimes the educational assistants that are one-on-ones with students. So there's a lot of case management that we don't quite have covered due to our shortage. And that's, you know, we're concerned, given that we're being monitored for out of compliance, you know, which is nothing unusual, but special educators have to meet deadlines, and the criteria for that is sometimes a short turnaround. So we're working really hard on processes and systems so we can stay in compliance, but without bodies doing the paperwork and running the meetings and case and Medicaid, and it is an issue. So we're working on it.
A couple of other staffing items that I wanted to bring to your attention. One is we've decided that we really have a need for an admin assistant for facilities and grounds. With a construction services line now at about 2.2 million, the amount of projects we can accomplish and the work that brings really is taxing both our director of facilities and grounds, but also we've been kind of piecemealing administrative support for that position out of central office folks. It's really just become too much now with the volume of work that is going to be, it sort of is underway now, will be underway with this amount of money. So that's a position that we had a really strong candidate pool for. We have a great candidate, and I think that we'll see that pay dividends in terms of it's kind of staying on top of timelines and deadlines and communications and all those things that go along with the volume of work that happens beyond just the routine, making sure schools are functioning properly and cleaning and all the usual busy of summers. Now, essentially every summer for the foreseeable future is going to have one or more pretty big projects going on that this will help ensure that everything's kind of moving along the way as it should be. So we're excited about that. That'll be getting started here in the next few weeks. We had sort of an internal shift to fill that position from one of the schools. So now we're working to kind of backfill that position at a school. And so we're going to make sure that the transition happens smoothly at the school as first priority. And then once that's done, they'll shift over to central office and jump into that new role. And then lastly, preparing to post for a position that I've been sort of sitting on for really a couple of years now, which is this, it's something we talked about a couple of budgets ago, the community connection coordinator. Really trying to think about, in many places, this is a communication coordinator or pretty specific to communication. As I've sort of envisioned this position, I think communication is absolutely a piece of it, but I think the role can be more than communication. I think there are ways that this person can facilitate a closer connection between school and the community beyond communication. It could be organizing parent nights. It can be thinking about schools as these kind of community hubs that are starting to kind of grow in popularity. You know, we talked about this innovation development center concept. There's a clear amount of work needed to sort of connect community and those kinds of programs. So that's more in line with kind of what I'm thinking. They certainly could have an aspect of website management and content creation or help with that regard. But I don't want to limit it to websites and writing communications to families. So I'm still kind of fine tuning exactly what that is going to look like. I'm borrowing some language from other districts that have really the communication piece. And I'm working to kind of infuse that more community connectedness aspect of it. So hopefully, you know, sometime in September, this is a position we can post for. I don't think this position is as necessary to be timed for typical school positions. I think this one would draw a different kind of candidate pool that I think could be a good fit.
Maybe just a general question, Patrick. So it seems like you all have been very nimble in thinking about sort of short-term solutions to this staffing shortage. Is there something we should be thinking as a board long-term to try to alleviate this potential in the future, right? I mean, I don't know if broader economic or sort of housing or whatever else is driving these limitations are going to change for the foreseeable future. And so is this something that we need to be cognizant of during the next round of negotiations? Right? Is it just salaries are not appealing enough to get applicants in the door, or are there other factors that you think we may be able to help push forward to try to shore that up in the long term?
I do think there are a number of factors. I think this is a statewide demographic, a national challenge, really. When I think about Vermont specific, I do think salaries, I'm sure, is a piece of it, although I think we've done a lot to try and remain competitive through negotiations, and I think we should continue to do that. Beyond that, I think housing is a piece of it. I do think it's worth considering the role a school district can play in providing housing. My brother actually works for a school district in Colorado that owns, I bet they have 40 units that they own as a school district that they rent exclusively to employees at reasonable rates. He works in one of the ski areas where educators can't afford property in Bayonne. So they buy housing and they rent it at affordable rates so that isn't a barrier for people. I think I can't think of a single place in Vermont that does that. And as we continue to experience shortages, is it something that we might want to consider? Maybe. I also think we've been fortunate historically to not have to really recruit. We have basically put it on School Spring and filter the applicants to find the one that we want. Now, many positions, like of those 20 positions that are vacant or whatever it was, I bet half of them have 0 applicants right now. So our approach of post it and filter is probably insufficient going forward.
Well, that was actually my next question was, you know, in terms of supports positions is a recruiter, you know, somebody we might want to consider, or recruiting service or something.
Yeah. And some of that could be, I actually went to, a couple of us so the whole admin team went to the VPA Leadership Academy that was held down in Killington in August.
It was August. Well,
I guess we were down there the
July.
last day of July, so.
yeah.
And one of the strands was about, it was specifically recruiting candidates of color. But so many of the concepts apply to just a more robust candidate pool. And he really said, and again, in the context of recruiting candidates of color, you probably ought to be thinking about a 6-hour radius from your location to be recruiting actively to draw the candidates that you want. So that is Montreal, New York City, Boston, so a pretty wide range. So thinking about the various job fairs and other sort of ways to have a presence, make yourself known, and recruit. So brand new info, but something that really kind of caught my attention, and I think we need to think about how do we get more active in our recruiting. So that, I think, there's going to be a cost associated with that when we're sending somebody down to New York City for a 2-day job fair, or however, whatever that looks like. But I think it's money we're going to have to think about investing. And then the flip side is we can do all of those things, and probably in addition to those things, find ways to be able to operate with fewer people. I think that's our reality. It's sort of interesting when we started the sort of consolidation merger talk was about responding to declining enrollment and the financial pressures that we would feel, and creating efficiencies to solve that problem. Even in the last 3-4 years that we've started those conversations, the need has shifted around finding the financial savings to, we just need to find out how to operate more efficiently because we don't have the people. Even if we have the money, we can't get the people. Like we have the money in the budget for those 19 vacant positions. We can't fill them.
Beth has her hand up.
Yeah, Patrick and Katrina, I think it's worth mentioning about the educational assistants needing their associate's degree and the path we're considering taking for that.
So a number of our schools are funded through Title I program funds they're called school-wide program schools. So Title I, to be eligible to receive Title I funds, all of your staff, your support staff, have to be what's considered highly qualified. And that means they have an associate's degree or the equivalent. So a number of years ago, before my time, but Katrina was, I think, principal at Bristol. There was so when that became a requirement, there was a big push to basically get everybody who was employed at the time, but didn't have an associate's or better, to kind of jump through a lot of hoops and go through a lot of trainings to get what they consider to be the equivalent of an associate's degree. And so from that point forward, our practice has been, we only hire support staff that have an associate's degree or equivalent, so they can work in any one of our schools. We don't have to worry about, you can only work in that school and you can work in other schools, and that just gets to be kind of a logistical challenge to meet needs. Again, back in the day when we'd have loads of applicants and we could have that bar set pretty high, for some of our lowest paying jobs, we were able to get away with it. We have 11 support staff positions that are vacant. Not all of them would have to apply to this, but a number of them would. So we're looking at, and we're feeling pretty confident we'll be able to move ahead with a program. I think it's called Master Teachers, the one we were looking at. But it's basically a program where we could hire someone, say at Moncton or Mount Abe. Those are the two schools that are not school-wide programs under Title I. So we can hire someone that doesn't have an associate's or equivalent, with the requirement that they take this series of trainings through a master teacher or something that's like that, complete all the certificates, get their passing scores, whatever they need to do, and at the end of a year, they will have the equivalent of their associates, and then they're able to be assigned to any one of our schools as a way to try and help meet this need.
So
Hold on, hands, folks. Evan? Steve?
just because I talk first. Just a point of clarification, educational system, is that what we commonly call age or
Yes.
para educators?
Yep.
Just a different title.
Yep.
Make things confusing.
Yes. Just keeping you on your toes, Kevin.
Okay.
Steve?
What's our exposure on this?
How many dollars do we receive?
Yeah.
For 600,000.
How much time would it take somebody to fill that requirement?
That's the piece that was the last sort of piece to make us feel like this is an appropriate approach, is that reasonable test of, can they complete what they need to complete in a year? Assuming they basically don't have anything they need,
And-
can they complete this series in a year's time?
And then they would potentially be soon after redeployed somewhere else, right? So they have to-
Potentially, right, we'd at least have to,
know that right?
Yep.
Which could happen anyway.
exactly. And the trick is, in the meantime, if we're able to bring a number of staff into schools that are not school-wide program schools, that perhaps we would then sort of bring in a new hire that can only work in one of those two schools, shift someone from one of those schools who can work in other schools
Right.
to a different place, so it can potentially create a domino. We'd want to manage that as well as we could, but if it comes down to meeting student needs and people have to move, it might be something that would have to happen.
Kelly?
Once somebody goes through that program, is it an actual associate's degree, and can that like travel with them?
It's not an actual associate's, but it is something I think that could probably travel with them. It would be the
So if they went
equivalent.
to
They
another
could
school or
demonstrate
something,
to
okay.
have the equivalent.
Sarah?
Do we provide a class in the contract? Like per year, or like like,
Educational assistants? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. The equivalent of 1-3 credit. Okay, of course. When we did this with a very large number, 30 people, when I was at Bristol, we actually provided in-house tutoring too. We spent a lot of time during our in-services and our staff meetings. And then it was a different platform, then it was called AccuPlacer, and people could take it for a price. Every test is an expense, and they could retake it and retake it. We had some retakes, when we've been an educational assistant in a kindergarten class for 15 years. We really probably don't remember algebra very well, and that was one of the modules.
Oh.
So we were providing tutoring from our math interventionists and our literacy folks, and it was a great bonding experience, I would say, but it was stressful, and challenging for a lot of folks. And
Sure.
back then, it wasn't just the modules and the assessments. There was also a big portfolio process. It seems like we wouldn't necessarily have to do both if we take this path now, which is a little bit easier. Easy for me to say.
Right, you're not the one taking the algebra test.
I did take it.
And it looks like Beth's hand is up again.
Sorry, I'll be quiet after this. It's just important to note that I would say the majority of our educational assistants are providing supports for behavior and personal care. So they're not providing instructional support. So the model of this is kind of antiquated in the sense that the paraeducators, now educational assistants, used to provide instruction to students. Like, we don't do that as much as we can avoid it anymore. Our educational assistants are there for a really specific reason, medical attention, behavior, most importantly. So just had to say that.
And if you remember the DMG report, which we, based so many of our sort of systems changes on, it really spoke to that very clearly about the prevalence in Vermont of the use of support staff, sort of your least trained people, carrying far too much of the load instructionally. So we've made a lot of shifts away from that, as Beth just reflected on.
Sarah and then Bailey, and then I'm gonna move us on just because we have.
Very
other items.
quick random question. You know how they have like a training for the first level nursing, et cetera, at the vocational center? Is there any thoughts to trying to get the whole like all three districts together to offer some kind of classes like that to get this kind of position, like an adult ed?
And there hasn't been any work around that to date, but it's an interesting idea. I think I can imagine in the future with regionally or Addison County districts putting their heads together to think together and work together on how to solve the staffing crisis.
I know that there's resources that the association puts out from a state perspective.
Yeah.
I know that there's a website that has a lot of different, I don't know if they're really credit bearing or just certificate hours, which they then can use to apply towards above and their compensation. So I know there's a push from that direction oftentimes.
Some of the challenge really is that we're in competition with essentially every sector of the employment market, right? So
Yes.
everyone is short-staffed. So I think there's probably not a sort of magic solution to this, but I think we need to chip away at it in every way that we can.
Two things. One, I was thinking similar to what Sarah was saying, and human services kind of guides kids into more preschool daycare stuff. So I feel like that might be able to be broadened, expanded, because they do lifespan human development. So they do have knowledge of that stuff. And I was just curious about the program that you picked. If it does line up a little bit with what Beth was saying, is there like a way to do that criteria, an associate's degree in behavior intervention or something like that would maybe more fit our needs, or is it kind of just academic pieces?
It looks pretty academic.
Okay.
It's really coming from a federal law
that's what
more
I'm
than
wondering.
anything else. So there isn't a lot of wiggle room from that perspective, but we do so much in-house. We're very, as much as scary these numbers of not having filled positions, we are pretty resource rich here, and we do a lot with our PAs, and we have so much talent. We're very, very lucky. So people seek out their own, we provide it. Even just today, we were sharing some of the free webinars that are available through Vermont PAS. I'll be working with them myself on Thursday for a little while, and I just want to keep sort of bolstering up as much as we often say, that want our least skilled folks working with our neediest kids. We've got some incredibly skilled folks. So I think being thoughtful about the way we say that too is super important, because there are some folks who taught me quite a few things in this district.
Okay, if we're good, let's move on.
Sure. So update on our sort of work with Lincoln and the withdrawal process. So a number of things in the works right now over the course of so really going back to the spring, Lincoln reached out interested in food service and really starting off exploring, what if MAUSD were to run the food service program and manage the funds and really sort of take on the entire food service program. We explored that with some hesitancy, right? The liability and the workload that puts on MAUSD accountant, business manager, food service director, et cetera, was a concern. Even if there was some sort of financial compensation to account for that, if it drives those people out of those positions, again, we're finding ourselves, okay, we have money, but we can't hire, so we're in a pickle. So trying to really be cognizant of that risk. All that said and done, we kind of produced a number that was a number that Lincoln didn't think was in their best interest. So that conversation kind of stalled there. Later in the summer, late June or sometime in July, the superintendent for Lincoln School District reached out, curious about some help with transportation and wanting to revisit the conversation about food service. So I met with the superintendent, we had a conversation about kind of exploring some possibilities in those two areas. In terms of food service, they were really looking for some help, probably with one of our Starksboro routes, to pick up one leg of one of the routes in Lincoln to try and make it so they could really pare down to 2 bus routes instead of 3. Floyd and I had a conversation with Bench Transit to just talk that through and try to understand what are the implications as we consider, helping in that regard. In the end, what it would mean is one of our longer bus routes, the South Starksboro bus route, would have to go into the center village of Lincoln and then up to the elementary school, then back down to 116 and then out to Robinson. Would add quite a lot of time to that long bus route already. And so we said, that's not something that we can help you out with. In terms of food service, what we started exploring more was this idea of vending food. So we would make food at Mount Abe, deliver it to Lincoln, and that was it. We'd have a fee for each meal. We wouldn't manage any of the financial components. Really, it would be, we make the meals, deliver them, and you give us a check and keep it super clean that way. Initially, our food service wasn't interested in that because the quality of food you can provide goes down when you've got to deliver it. And if you're delivering tomorrow's breakfast at 11 o'clock in the morning prior, that's probably not going to be as good a breakfast as if they made it that morning. So there was a concern there. But in the end, it was getting to be late in the summer and Lincoln didn't really have a plan. So our food service kind of agreed they could get past that as an option to consider. Over the last several weeks, we've been exploring that option a little more fully. And actually gave some numbers to Lincoln to say, if we were to do this, this is what it would look like. And I think just today kind of came to agreement that they wanted to move forward and there's no other plan they have to feed students next week. So I think we have some more work to really codify it, but conceptually, that's the position we're in. We did absorb one food service provider from Lincoln. That person was taken on, sort of absorbed here at Mount Abe. And the intent was for them, still is for them to take on a lot more of the baking that we currently outsource. So they would bake fresh breads and rolls and things like that here in the Mount Abe kitchen. And so in addition to that add-on, this person will have some responsibilities for preparing some of the food that's going to be delivered. And actually, he would be the person that will deliver it to Lincoln. So he was just at Lincoln this past year. So the intent is I'll meet you at the door with the food and hand it over. You can give me the sort of refillable meal dishes that I'll bring back. And that's it. So the logistics are getting worked out. I don't know, you just had that conversation today with a rep from Lincoln School District.
We're at a high level, I think we're in agreement with it. The devil's in the details and we're working through some of those, but I think we'll be able to line up the reality is they have no other option. If we don't step up, they don't have a plan to feed their kids.
Oh, yeah, so a different lens, so it's interesting as the year progresses, the kind of wrinkles that we realize we have to iron out as we have a new relationship with Lincoln. One of the more recent wrinkles is around the co-curricular programming at Mount Aid. And trying to figure out what's the right balance there. Luckily, we've had other students, this is not new that we have other districts or students out of district, et cetera. So kind of where that is landing, which is going to be hard for some people because it's different. Students enrolled at Mount Aid absolutely 100% have access to the co-curricular programming that we have here. Whether they're from Lincoln or they tuition in or choice in from somewhere else, you're enrolled at Mount Aid, you have access to Mount Aid programming. If you're a home study student and you live in one of the 4 towns that make up MAUSD, you have access to Mount Aid co-curricular programming. If you attend a private school that Mount Aid has an agreement with, whether that's a member-to-member agreement, which is a VPA sanctioned process, which means you have to be a VPA sanctioned private school for us to have a member-to-member relationship with you, then under that member-to-member, students from those private schools can sometimes, and this is on a season by season basis, participate. If we have low soccer numbers and we can handle a member-to-member with other schools to bring in kids to fill out our soccer team, great. If we're filled to the brim with soccer numbers, we're not going to take on students from a private school that displace Mount Aid kids from the team or from playing time or from that experience. So that's a season by season, sport by sport, member to member agreement sanctioned VPA. The other kind of agreement that we have is a collaborative. So we have a collaborative with Virgins around multiple sports. So essentially the path to participate in MAUSD or Mount Aid co-curriculars is you attend school at Mount Aid, you're a home study in one of the 4 towns, home study in Lincoln is not eligible. Or you attend a school that we have a member-to-member or collaborative program.
And in that case, it doesn't matter which one you're from.
Right. There could be a kid from Charlotte that goes to Red Cedar and we have a member-to-member with Red Cedar and they want to play soccer and they can play soccer.
Does North Branch fall into that same?
Yep, so North Branch is a private school that has students from in-district and out-of-district towns. And so in the seasons where we have an agreement with North Branch as a member-to-member, those kids participate. If we don't, then they don't.
Got it.
So our thinking on this is, so BPA has oversight for athletics. They basically have no oversight for activities. So if we use the musicals as activities, BPA has nothing to do with activities. We thought it would be challenging to have one set of rules for athletics and a different set of rules for activities. We wanted to keep it consistent across all the programming. So we leaned on the structures that exist through the BPA in those relationships. And that's sort of our landing point, which is going to be difficult for the families in Lincoln who home study and want their kid and have historically been able to have their kid attend and participate in the Mount Aid Fall Musical. Now that's not an option anymore. Or in the event that a family from Lincoln is using their tuition dollars from the Lincoln separation now to pay toward a private school that we sometimes have a member-to-member with and sometimes don't, depending on numbers. Typically speaking, if we use our Fall Musical again, any student who wants to participate in the Fall Musical at Mount Aid can. There's usually dozens and dozens of kids. We don't usually need more kids to be able to make that happen. It's usually trying to manage all the kids that want to come and be a part of it, which is a great problem to have.
Yeah.
But we wouldn't necessarily be looking to grow the already pretty large, hard to manage number of kids even further. And the cost to find a costume for them and all the associated responsibilities and costs that go along.
Sarah.
I'm just gonna clarify. So if you live in Lincoln and you went to Middlebury CVU, Rice, South Burlington, you name it. Then that's where you can do co-curriculars.
Unless we have a member to member with them.
No, well,
But we,
Unless you're-
I'm not
Yes.
including
Collaboration.
Jen,
No,
seems to be
but
our
even
main
CVU.
member to member.
So if we offer something that CVU doesn't,
oh, I see.
Oh,
and we engage in a member to member with CVU.
Like if we had
to
fencing and
Exactly,
they did not.
so hockey is a good example, Middlebury has hockey.
right.
Ah,
We
right.
often have a member to member agreement with Middlebury, so that when Middlebury has space to take on Mount Abe students,
Ultimate, yeah, got it.
through a lottery, Mount Abe students can go and participate on the hockey team in Middlebury through the member.
But we have that with North Branch and Red Cedar, the two schools that are most commonly.
Right, so again, season
Yeah.
to season, but North Branch, Red Cedar, Middlebury, Virgin CVU are the schools that we most commonly have some sort of member to member with.
So is Lincoln trying to set up a member to member with them?
But they can't because BPA doesn't have anything to do with elementary school sports. So it's really only applies to the high school level, middle and high school. So it's more whatever school Lincoln folks choose to send their kids to that drives their ability to participate.
It's one of the joys of separation. I'm assuming it's all done, but just to be clear, I don't think I've heard it specifically, but they got their bond money, they bought the building, if you will, we've done a handshake and passed a check for the ed fund stuff, and all that separation stuff is behind us without any.
I believe so, that 74,000 check is out the door.
It has been sent, I don't believe it's been cashed. I haven't looked at that line, but yeah,
I would assume so.
we're
It's
done,
all done.
we're done.
Done. The quitclaim deed is done, that's been handed over, yep. It's more of these. So tuition is something we're still sort of ironing out. I got a draft MOU from Dina this morning. That is sort of an attempt to help be really clear about what that relationship looks like. I do have some enrollment information that is interesting in terms of who is and isn't coming to Mount Abe. Because if you recall, as we were building the budget for this coming year, for the year we're in, we had to make some assumptions about the number of students we thought would come from Lincoln to Mount Abe, because that drives what we would expect for revenue. So we budgeted, I think 80% is the assumption we made, that 80% of all the possible students that could come from Lincoln School District to Mount Abe would. And right now, the percent that is confirmed attending is 77%. There's a handful, there are 10 students that we haven't gotten a response from. We haven't heard, yes, I'm enrolling, or no, I'm not. So the possible percent attending is 88%. So confirmed 77 and could be upwards of 88%. So we're going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of that 80% mark that we estimated, which we thought was a conservative estimate.
You started at 70.
Right. I think Lincoln was
First go
right.
around, you were talking 70.
Lincoln was pushing hard that 90 was more realistic, or 90 something. And I think we landed at 80. What's interesting, and I don't know if this is a trend or not, it's all brand new. I have the breakdown grade by grade. So incoming, I'll start with incoming seniors. So incoming seniors, 80% of the seniors that could possibly come to Mount Abe are coming to Mount Abe. 81, almost 82% of the juniors. A little under 67% of the sophomores. 80% of the freshmen. 100% of the eighth graders. 53% of the seventh graders. So if, and part of where we were thinking, again, conservative thinking was, whatever the percent is in year one, it's probably going to be lower in year two and lower in year three. And if this current seventh grade group is any indication, hopefully the trend isn't as rapidly declining as it looks like it has the potential to be. When you're talking about, and so that's assuming 15 total incoming seventh graders. The upcoming classes at Lincoln are not 15 consistently. They're more in the 8, 9, 10, 11 range. So
Yeah, it's hard.
3 kids one way or the other, I mean, can make a big difference.
Hard to pick trends with they're so small.
Right.
So there are students that have been at Mount Aid 1, 2, 3 years that are peeling off.
Or going into their 6th year.
Peeling off and going somewhere else.
Not
Or they may have been going somewhere else already, but not coming in, so
Or
it's.
graduating early.
There, I think the one group that we haven't been able to really capture are students from Lincoln who haven't been coming to Mount Aid, so are somewhere else and haven't responded. There's some number there. I don't think it's a very big number,
Yeah.
but
Like if
We're
they
having a
were
hard
North
time kinda-
Branch or
Right.
Red Cedar or homeschool. Yeah.
right. So we've had a little hard time kind of. fitting into that.
There's too much.
Right.
They went to Rice or whatever.
So these aren't exact numbers, but these are, we feel. So the ones that that I have confirmed attending means we've received communication from their families that they intend to enroll. Now, whether they show up on day 1, I guess that might be a different story. We're gonna check again when school actually starts, especially for the 10 kids that we haven't heard anything from.
Brad, go ahead.
You're muted, Brad.
Yeah.
I know, I'm trying to unmute. It kind of makes sense to me that the 7th graders would have a lower percentage. Because they're looking at doing middle school someplace else, because there are more options for middle school, and then. Yeah, I wouldn't be at all surprised to see the numbers go up once they hit 9th grade again.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Mhm. 'Cause they're- yeah.
Just, keep them home for another year or 2, or send them to Vermont Commons for a couple of years or whatever, but then probably come home after that. I would, but I'm the optimist here, so.
That's a good point.
Okay, I think maybe if there's nothing else, we'll move on to safety.
Yeah, so obviously you've been involved in some of the safety legislation and the policies that have been mandated. What I wanted to call your attention to here really is the visitor management aspect of the new safety legislation. So we had piloted intentionally, the intent was for it to be at Bristol and Mount Abe. There was an issue getting some of the hardware delivered. So Bristol never quite got off the ground, but it did get off the ground at Mount Abe. This Raptor visitor management system. So basically the way it works is someone who comes to the school the first time, and this would be true for any one of our schools going forward, they would come to the school, they would put their license in a little device. That device would read their license, it would check their license against various registries, make sure that everything's all clear, and then it would print a badge for them. But it also tracks when they're in the building, they would sign out so that we know when they left. So it's a way to manage. We do a really good job of managing the students that are in and out and who's in the building, and who's not in the building. So if there's an emergency, we can account for the students. We've historically done a far worse job at accounting for adults in the building. So this is going to help us do that really well. It's going to help be that extra layer of security to make sure that folks that are coming into the building to pick up kids or do whatever are safe to be there. And it's going to create badges with their picture on it, who they're going to see, the time and date they came, etc. It's going to help us sort of manage visitors, and it very clearly complies with the new legislation for visitor management. So the intent originally was to have this, as I mentioned, pilot last year at Bristol and Mount Abe, and not necessarily force the issue on the other schools if they didn't think it was going to be, the world's greatest thing. With the passage of this legislation, having tighter and consistent visitor management practices across the district, not only for visitors that are from the community of those schools, but also from district employees that are in various schools signing in so that there's a record of who's in the building, is a procedure we need to get tighter on. So all that to say, I have a communication that's going to be going out to families soon that explains this visitor management system, and that's going to be different. Some people are likely to react strongly to having to scan their ID and get a badge and check into the front office and all those things. And on the flip side, others are going to be really happy that we're taking security seriously and kind of upping our game with this. So you can expect to hear probably mixed reactions as we roll this out. But I think it's the best way to be compliant with the legislation and do our due diligence, in keeping kids safe.
Sarah,
What are the hours of
So it's gonna be only, you know, there's those few minutes when the school day first starts, when everybody's flowing through. But at some period within about 15 minutes of that sort of transition time, the expectation is all doors are locked for the rest of the school day until dismissal. So everyone who comes to the building comes through, is funneled through a singular point of entry. And that's where the check-in happens. And that would be true for, like, so my badge gets me in almost any door in any building. If I go visit a school, I need to go through the front office, sign in so they know I'm in the building. So in the event of an emergency, they know who to account for. So that will be a new
glad
practice.
they let you in.
Yeah. Well, they don't let
Depends on
me
the
in, I
day.
can get in, but.
Yeah,
What is
you can.
Kristen?
Couple of quick questions, just thinking about like what's the time frame from, you know, scanning your driver's license to when the badge is spit out?
20 seconds.
Oh, okay. And that's not good.
It might actually be a little faster than that, but
I had it done visiting. some meetings.
it's pretty quick, isn't it?
Nice.
Yeah.
I didn't have my license one day, so I had my another ID. And it's still like official, but it didn't come up. So it was an error. But so.
That part.
Okay.
Yeah.
So and my second question, I'm just thinking about those who volunteer for various programs like Four Winds, you know, for example. Is this something where they're gonna have to, each time they come to the building, they'll scan in, or is it just once?
So really, and this is true for a parent or anyone else too, you only have to sort of put your ID in one time.
Mhm.
And then the system recognizes you, and then like as you come to the door. And you have that exchange with the admin assistant who lets you in. They can, you know, indicate, like they can go into the system and check you're here, so you don't have to swipe your ID every single time.
Got it.
But everyone will have to the first time to
Mhm.
get them entered into the system.
Got it.
There's a way to manually enter people. Which may be something to do like for field trips and other things like that,
Or people who don't have.
Right.
or people don't have.
That's not common, but.
Right, but I think it can be a driver's license or a non-driver ID, but it has to be a state issued ID.
It doesn't work on military IDs. That's what
Yeah,
Oh, another school ID.
it has to be one you can fly with.
but again, they can type your information in and get it that way too.
Okay,
So
Cool, thank you.
would that increase, I mean, it's a net, but potentially the people that are in and out, a lot that are contractors, I guess you could say. Would that increase issuing badges to these people?
Yeah, folks that are in and out a lot, and rather than printing them the badge that you peel off and stick on, we might do more of a badge like this or something that they can just wear. They still need to check in because we still need to account for when they're in the building and when they left the building. But we won't have to print a badge every time. We're also actually looking into getting devices that enable us to print our own actual sort of hard badges. Typically, right now, we farm this out, so.
Really?
I'm sure this will come up in questions from community. When you're scanning that ID, you said against various databases, is that triggering a report to any database? So if somebody's
It triggers an alert to,
looked for,
triggers an alert in-house.
okay,
I'm not aware of, I don't know if you know, Floyd, I'm not aware of it triggering anyone.
I'm just thinking
Outside
if
the organization.
somebody.
Well, actually, I take that
got
back.
warrant out for their or something,
It does
is that gonna-
actually notify Bristol PD.
Okay,
So Bristol PD, we've actually had this happen. So I get an alert, Bristol PD gets alert, building administrators get an alert. Maybe guidance counselors, obviously the admin assistant at the screen sees something pop up. And we have some protocols. We may continue to have those protocols evolve in terms of what does the admin assistant do when the alert pops up?
yeah.
so, and I'm just thinking, we've communicated that there is a person I know has an issue with a stolen identity. And now their name is associated with things that are not accurate. So they very well could flag. So there's kind of like those like
Mhm.
that seems to be more common now to have like identity issues.
Yeah.
So I just was curious about that stuff too. So,
I had-
Pandora's box. that
Right,
people
it's
do
all
this sort of
like-
stuff, just
Yeah.
all these little funny things.
Mhm. I had two questions. One, you said you were gonna let families know about this, and I wondered if maybe you thought about putting them in front porch forum as well.
Yeah, that's how we would probably do it. So
Okay,
typically when
great.
we send this communication out, we would send it to, we put it on the website,
Great.
Front Porch Forum, Facebook, and probably a BlackBerry Connect message.
And then I was wondering about the singular point of entry and all the doors being locked, and I know I've talked to you about this before, about how that will work with automatic doors. So I'm assuming you have to be buzzed in, right? And so
Yep.
will it be the automatic door that opens?
Yes,
Okay, excellent. Excellent.
and I've had
Buzzing in doesn't work.
the
for
one place
everybody.
where we know that didn't work, I already had that conversation, and it might be fixed by now.
Great.
No, it's underway.
Awesome.
Those are fun things to coordinate. Yeah. I've had to do that before.
And then the last thing that I wanted to mention is just, and I think you talked a little bit about the safety position earlier, and you mentioned Pandora's box, Steve, and I just hope that in light of our conversations around equity, that we think about whomever is in these roles, that safety can mean a lot of different things, and that there's a sensitivity that's really important when we're, we know threat assessments are real and they're critically important, and also can go horribly wrong. And so, I don't know what can be built into that position to make sure that that the person in that position has a sensitivity to some of the different issues that can come up. Anybody else on safety? All right, facilities.
All right, I'll turn it over to Floyd to just sort of highlight some of the bigger facilities projects that have been or are currently underway. this summer.
We're winding them down for the summer.
Okay.
Starting Beaman, we've installed natural gas. So Vermont Gas is in there. We're updating our boilers to reflect that. We think it's maybe a 5-year payback with the savings. The HVAC project is still moving along, trying to tease out how best to leverage the money from Efficiency Vermont under that ESSER guideline.
And that's a Beaman as well.
Yeah, Beaman.
That's Beaman specifically. that
That's
you're talking about
specific
now.
Beaman for that money. There's some other here, and consideration of Bristol as well. Kitchen appliance upgrade of the equipment in there. Other than the oven was owned by the town of New Haven and the fire department, and we just got permission on the old stove to adios it and bring something in that stays lit, that has efficiency. And we were worried that they gave us permission to dispose of it as we wished. We're excited about that. Flooring, upgrading in Beaman as well. We're moving as much as we can to the Flotex that you see through this building. It's fast, it doesn't absorb water. You get a stain, you can pop a tile and replace it. We're bringing in, as an aside, Flotex will allow us to look at robotic cleaning. It's expensive, but it never calls out sick. It doesn't mind who it's working with. A lot of benefits there. It doesn't take breaks. So there's the advantage of Flotex is it gives us some options down that road in light of Patrick's points about staffing. We're still struggling. Let's talk Bristol. We're working on that front entrance and the front office entry. Playground is in conversation with universal access, and I think we're close to getting that rolling forward. Moncton, paving the parking lot.
Maybe before I wanna highlight the Bristol playground, like that sounds like not too big a deal. That's a big deal. That's $200,000.
$225,000.
For a couple of pieces of playground equipment that are universally accessible, like student in a wheelchair can get on the swing.
So the picture we have in that design is the playground that you can pull into. Our goal is students, but also it'll probably be the most accessible playground in Addison County. So it would be, somebody could come in with their grandmother who has accessibility issues, wheel onto this playground, get on a swing, go for a swing, and it's going to attach to a pavilion, so there's space underneath that's also accessible, and covered. We'll be able to use that as an outdoor classroom through the year, so we're able to best leverage and manage and, create the greatest accessibility we can for that equipment.
Do you know what this surface is gonna be?
I do, but I can't remember. It will be something that is,
It's not mulch or ground.
no, gosh, it's a hard surface. Yeah, it's a hard surface.
That is
with
amazing. That is amazing.
The surface is, I think, was $85,000.
Yeah, I mean, that's the most, that is incredibly expensive, but it's really not accessible.
And then
If you
it'll
don't-
feed to.
You
a
can have the
cement-
greatest accessible equipment in the world,
Can't
but
go on it.
you can't get to it. So that's awesome. That makes my heart happy.
Moncton, if you've seen the parking lot, we're so very excited about that. It's, we hit a spring and then we hit another spring. We've piped it, we've done, we feel like we've done, it's been a great summer to find water. And,
Way to put a positive spin on that.
oh, I got another one in a minute. But we have delayed moving forward with blacktop over it. We want to cycle this for 1 year and we'll blacktop it in the spring, once we're substantially more confident that we've gotten all the frost, right?
Yeah.
We don't want to put blacktop on and then hang our heads and tear it up.
Right.
So, take a look, if you're out and buy it, it's pretty great and not inexpensive. In addition at Moncton, we're doing flooring upgrades there. We replaced the shed. Robinson, we put that new playground in. We're doing a gym floor and a kitchen floor. We're redoing the kitchen to make it a little bit more workable. New counter shelves, a sink that's legal. We didn't have one that was great. We will now, better storage. What else? Mount A. We're doing some pipe repair, some driveway repair. The lockers, if you come through, you'll see the lockers now will fit a backpack. We're
And they
quite
won't cut
excited
kids
about
or
that.
tear clothing.
That is amazing.
We've invested substantially in the lawn, in the athletic fields. Take a look at how green it is.
Yeah, this might but not be the year.
We actually spent very little money.
Oh, gotcha. That was the other joke.
No
Gotcha.
irrigation
But
needed.
look at how great it looks. I mean, we really, I thought our grounds person is new this year. And he is basking in the glow of having these great lawns. And I just said, "Yeah, enjoy it."
Start out on a high note. Yeah.
John, you have set a high bar. You were in trouble next year, but,
Boy, yeah. Don't tell.
Yeah, I think that kind of walks us through where we are. We're excited about what we've got. We've got a lot of paint. We've got a lot of wax.
What's the, I'm just really appreciative of all the work that is being done on all our facilities, and I'm thinking about climate change and air conditioning and that kind of thing, and is that something you're thinking about for all of our schools, or what that?
we're thinking about it in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't always have to be AC.
Mhm.
If you go up to the wrestling room and just walk in there with the dehumidification,
Mhm.
that's a pretty effective way to cool, but to take that moisture out. And I would say moisture is probably something we are more concerned about this year than in other years. We had a little bit of moisture in Bristol. We just got test results this morning with what the growths were, and it's nothing to be concerned of. We're very, very thankful. It was our expectation that it wasn't that big of a deal, but you never know. But we are adding some cooling and heat pumps into that area of Bristol, the underground part by the main entrance, where we can get a little bit more dehumidification in there and go ahead and cool it as well. But to your point, we're looking at that in a number of different ways under the ESSER dollars. And it's a conversation we just had with L&N Consulting on a more holistic picture here. The same at Bristol, with that feeling more and more like it's the landing spot for ELP in the summer. Investing in that for the entire years, something that we're looking at. You know, we're limited by dollars. It's just, you know, there's a lot of money there that we could spend, and we will. Any questions? Our goal
Maybe
is
just to
keep
elaborate on
Patrick
that.
out of- Our goal is to keep Patrick out of the projects because he has great ideas.
We've got a facilities committee to do that.
Vegetable garden, I'm talking on it.
No, usually, yeah, for a construction project that's underway and
People run for
Well-
that. Because you're bright ideas.
I stick to my guns in that it's better to do it right the first time and feel like you have the confidence going forward. So when you are working on one project and you realize you uncover this other need, it's never gonna get cheaper than right now while it's all torn apart and the contractors are here. So better to spend that money right now than punt it down the road 10 years and spend 10
That
X.
Muncie parking lot is a great example. When we were figuring who we were gonna contract with to do that excavation and all the site work. The person that gave us the number that we thought was best said, point blank, if you're not willing to do this right, I'm not your guy. And we said, you're our guy, right? You know, because that's where we wanna be.
And just in terms of the moisture in the growth at Bristol, part of it was unfortunate in many ways and caused us to explore things that we might not otherwise have explored. And we found perimeter drains that were failing that we now know we need to address. Most of the windows are well past their life and they're leaking, and there were condensate pumps from the mini split units in the office that were dripping down on the windows that were leaky. So just this sort of series of things that it caused us to go in search of that we found, which is problematic because it's going to be tens of thousands anyway to make the repairs. But we're going to get out in front of this problem of moisture better now, having known it. So the classrooms, the classrooms most impacted have plans. They've been sort of redone and they're in great shape. So it's safe, it's healthy, it's clean, people are happy, and we're going to continue to.
I think one of
Fix
the
the
big
problem.
takeaways from the report that we got on those rooms is they had less mold spores inside than we had outside. So our air quality, we've talked about it for a while. We feel, generally speaking, we do a pretty good job. I think that shows that even in this wet summer with some issues, it does pay off.
Okay, so now we're gonna move into board management and governance. We have a few items here. It's already 7:30, but I'm hopeful that we can get through them pretty quickly, so we're not here too late. So we usually approve the board work plan in our September meeting, and we can still obviously, go along with the plan as it's laid out without that formal adoption. But there are some things that, when Patrick and I were meeting, that came up that aren't really accounted for in the plan right now. And so I wanted to bring them to the group and to see what folks thought about a proposal I have for how we might address these. So the curriculum instruction and assessment presentations were a way for the board to hear more about the means behind the ends and to get a more deep focus into some of the work we're doing district-wide. And the plan was to build in 3 of those presentations. Right now, I think only one of them is currently on the work plan as it stands.
Is that in red?
Is that one in red? Yeah, that's in red. And then also in red, we had agreed to host 3 conversations with board and staff to increase our communication. Last year, that time, I think almost entirely got focused on the grievance and the safety and MTSS work. We don't, I think there's one spot on our work plan that has one of those meetings in there. I wanted to see what folks thought about, since the real intention and in keeping with policy governance, those conversations should really be focused on the ends. And it's a good opportunity to hear from staff what they think about that work and that vision. And since the curriculum instruction and assessment presentations are also focused on the ends, I wondered what folks thought about combining those 2. So it might look like we hear a presentation. And then we have the opportunity to have a conversation with staff to hear what their reaction is to that. So it keeps us focused on what our role is. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Nodding
for
heads.
sure.
Great, okay.
Sounds great. Yeah.
So the next part of that is scheduling.
I think,
Yes.
I don't see any problem with that, but I'm not so sure we should have some time separate as well. I mean, you hear the presentation, you can hear what MEAA or whatever their name is has to say about it.
Mhm.
But there seems like there may be some desire, or there may be to have some introspection after that, not necessarily.
Desire on the part of the board.
Yeah, and maybe it's fine, we talk, everybody's at the table, and we talk, but I can see where it may not be as direct a conversation with the 3 parties involved with the presentation.
Can I add a little bit? Maybe
Yeah.
it helps illustrate, because I'm having heart palpitations. In June, when this was first on the agenda for us to do as the CIA presentation, we were going to focus specifically on this great investment that we put into math professional development, K-8. And so we were going to have the All Learners Network coach come, and we were going to have picked a few teachers who have been really deep in it. I would love to do that, even if it's all the way in December. And to Kevin's point, I'm having a hard time with the connection between the MAUSD. By bringing teachers to that presentation, I was excited to do that, because folks who have been working on the leadership teams and who have really been partaking in some of that professional development, I wanted their voice to be here for you, not just me or the ALO consultant. And I don't know if that helps meet some of that connection that you're looking for from teachers in a different way.
Is that concern specifically around like that it's named as MAEA, like it would be association leaders?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I just wonder if I try curriculum instruction and assessment, it's ginormous.
Yep.
So I was really gonna try to hone in on one aspect that we've been putting so much energy into.
Yep.
And I'm just not sure if that connects to what the kinds of conversations the association has wanted to be having, to Kevin's point.
Chris, I was wondering if some of what you're getting at was to help don't know if shape is the best word, but help shape those conversations with MEEA around topics that are appropriate for the board to be talking with MEEA about.
Right. And I guess also, and maybe I'm not remembering the genesis of these conversations to begin with, but in my mind, it wasn't that it was with MAEA, it was that it was their idea that staff should have more of an opportunity to talk to the board. And so for that example, I wondered if like folks who teach math might want to just, and then that would still raise concerns.
And that was what I was gonna do anyway.
Yeah.
I'm just the first time I'm hearing
Yeah,
the idea of combining them, and I guess.
That
will do, but
yeah. What other people think, Sarah?
I've always been really unsure of the purpose except for having more interaction with the board. And I like the idea in the fact that it's not the same group of people that would be coming to talk to us. That seems to be the case every time, that it would be like if I've ever been invited to go do something and be part of a presentation, and then I have that's like my only interaction with the board ever where I work, but they're getting they're having a conversation with staff and faculty in that. I mean, we're trying to hear that voice come to the table more, and I think it provides that with a little bit of framework. I don't know if that was this group's education association goal for the meeting, but otherwise, I don't know if I would be afraid to combine them. I don't know.
It's tricky.
Our goal, I think, would be met.
I think part of what I'm hearing is a question of, do the board's interests align or not align with MAEA's interests in the conversations that were agreed to a couple of years ago?
Right.
So does it make sense to feel that out before we make a decision on it?
Yeah, just curious, if it would be the representation from MAEA that we've been working with. I would almost, I think it would be more of an opportunity if there were others that could do the presentation. I don't know if that's coming across the way that I'm sort of feeling about it. Just so that it's sort of fresh for everybody. So that there's no carryover from previous conversations, so that the presentation would be a little bit more. Or maybe come across a little differently. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Part of what I think I'm hearing, I think you were saying this, and I think this is sort of the tone of what I'm getting is, it sounds like it would be the MAUSD board's interest if there was a presentation on math and people who are delivering instruction in math and are part of this work and the ALN and everything else are part of the presentation. You're hearing about means behind the ends. You're hearing from teachers who are engaged in that work.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that satisfies the interest of that connection with the staff.
Right.
Which may or may not satisfy the interest that prompted these meetings that
Right.
surfaced when MAEA initiated the
Right.
conversation.
And if it were like you described, Patrick, and if that also is more of what you would imagine, Katrina, maybe maybe Aaron and I had that conversation with Sarah and Michelle, who are the co-leads right now, to say, hey, here's what we're proposing that we think, makes the most sense and what we think would be really valuable for the board.
And neither of them were union leaders at the time that these conversations started. So that may have evolved a bit as well.
I think there's an itch that original interest came from that. We probably can't scratch. And so I think, maybe we can offer this and maybe we do it anyway, because I
Sure,
think
yeah.
it would have been maybe part of what you were gonna do anyway. Yeah, Steve.
I'm curious if. Cause I tend to agree that the conversation should be more ends focused with NEA and. I think frankly, the conversation we had at our retreat would be a great conversation to have with them. How do they feel about the vision? How do they feel about the strategic plan? How do they feel about the ends monitoring? You know, when they look at that, what do they see? You know,
I recall we did. The first time we had this, or maybe it was around Nate's presentation, actually. I thought we talked a little bit about ends, but one of my interests right now is we've got to figure out how to shoehorn these things into the work plan.
right.
So this was a way to maybe,
Kill two birds.
yeah,
Well, and part of why it's in red is the intent initially was that there would be three of the curriculum instruction and assessment opportunities and 3 of the conversations in MEA. There's only 1 of each currently even on the plan.
And are these tentatively set up to happen on the alternate meeting day?
well, that's a
That's
whole
not
nother
part-
part of the question, but first, let's see what Mike was gonna say, and then we'll unpack that part of the fun.
Yeah, I was just thinking in terms of maybe a good faith effort on the board to engage with MAEA. It might be worth talking to leadership about ways that they think the members might best be able to participate in this sort of setting, right? In the sense that I love the idea of hearing from them. If, you know, math teachers or those who are engaged, if they feel like they can speak openly and freely in this kind of setting. But I would hope that that's the case, but I don't know. And so it may be worthwhile for setting up that meeting and offering for these faculty to come and speak to us. That might be a place where you talk to MAEA leadership to say, what would be the best way to set it up so that those voices could be heard? So that those individual members would feel comfortable talking in that setting. I think that would show sort of respect to their role in terms of protecting their members, while also opening up the possibility that you have real engagement and dialogue in a way that everybody is hoping to foster. It would be just a way that maybe strategically to make that more effective.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, it's tricky because we have to be careful that it still keeps our role intact in that we're not putting ourselves in the position of trying to solve problems that may come up that are for our administrators to solve. So it has, I don't know, it has to be.
Well, I guess I was even worried about problems per se, more format. right?
Yeah,
It's all
gotcha.
well and
I
good to
understand what
say,
you mean.
yeah, come on over, come talk to the school board,
Yeah.
but if you're then worried that you have to talk to the assistant superintendent and say, I hate this new program, and you have to say that in front of me and her, and now you're not gonna say it, because you don't know if the MAEA has your back, or if you feel comfortable, like, maybe there's a more anonymous way to do it, or maybe they're totally comfortable doing that. So just being upfront at first that we acknowledge the potential power dynamic that we put ourselves into, and asking for their insight as to how to gracefully navigate that, as opposed to any details of the actual conversation. That was a suggestion.
I think this is one reason why I think we were trying to keep this conversation with them beyond a means. Because you're gonna run into that constantly, and really those conversations are meant to take place between the faculty and administration. Board does not need to get into that.
Agreed.
In my opinion,
Tricky.
anyway. I think, but what we want to hear is what is their general view of the overall picture? Do they see any red flags in terms of just general direction? You know, that they just like us to be aware of in a general sense. Not something where, you know, we don't have enough bodies doing this, we have detailed stuff. I'm sure we can fill sessions where, you know, people have disagreements about where things go on the detail level.
But your point about focusing on the ends monitoring report or the strategic plan or some of those, yeah, the higher level.
There's plenty to, you know, get feedback on those sort of things, I believe.
I like it. So. Do we? So we'd only scheduled one thus far. Does 3 feel like a lot to try to do in 1 week?
For curriculum instruction
Yeah.
assessment, one's great.
Message.
Well, what happened, I talked about too, is I could be more strategic in the way in which I use the superintendent's report for you as well, and try to be more resourceful in that way.
Mhm.
And then I'm not trying, like, I'd love to do, I could see doing maybe one more in the spring, but again, I want to make it interactive. They won't have it any other way. They won't come if they feel like the teachers, even the coach, are standing and delivering to you after they just, you know, been teaching all day long. So
Do some math.
they're gonna want to rotate you through some stuff, and they're gonna want to show you all the things they've learned. We used to do this many years ago as the ends monitoring report before we did it the format we did, and we did do 3. And in the end, I was cherry picking, right? I'm picking math because we have a pretty huge 3-year investment with the ALN. But what would I pick next? Like, I don't want to just, for the sake of present, because you're gonna get the monitoring report, you're gonna get the superintendent's monthly report. And to highlight this one thing that's really a big undertaking for our entire district, I think that warrants pretty easily a presentation to show you what we're doing.
And not just big in terms of workload, but big in terms of impact.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
All these are about an hour, we should say, so we have to fit in a good 6 hours. Into
Well,
our lives.
If we might lean back toward 1,
Yeah, okay,
and maybe that 1 was 2 hours.
great.
Which would probably be the amount of time you would need for like some hearing and then processing. And then, you know, maybe we have to figure out this whole board staff conversation piece in a different way.
But I think we should do that the way Steve suggested, then. And try to tackle. those two
Okay.
Big concepts.
So,
Well, in terms of this, I just want to throw out that in terms of the whole assessment presentation, my initial understanding was that assessment 101 was going to be kind of, here's the monitoring report. We quote a bunch of different assessments in it. SBAC, MAP, blah, 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 that we were going to take some little period of time, like, you know, with Lloyd's financial report and say, what is a MAP? What is SBAC? What is, you know, what is the transferable skill report card? You know, just kind of fill in the blanks a little bit about what each of those assessments are. So that we can kind of, do we feel that when you're putting all of those in front of us in a report, is that painting a pretty good picture of student achievement? Or at least we know what it is we're seeing in one of those. And I know that each time these reports have come out, we sort of, the tests have changed because that's what they do. They swap out the tests. So anyway, I thought that was just kind of getting everybody up to date on what the tests were, you know, what the assessments were. You know, I'd love to dive into math curriculum myself, but I thought that's what the original goal of the assessments 101 thing was just kind of making us more aware of what we were looking at in the ends report. Do I have that wrong?
I saw it as that and helping the board understand that there's an even more rounded sort of assessment plan beyond what's in the ends monitoring report. So that.
That's
and
fine. I mean, in terms of whether we need another session beyond this session, which I have no arguments with, you were asking, you know, do we need more than one of these? That was the only other thing that I thought we were originally trying to click off the list.
I'm almost wondering if we could, you say we, not me. Um, If we could get a even more abbreviated form of that and like the way of a chart, like what is this measure? What are the pros and cons of it? Like, period. What's a map test? Like, I know, cause I look at my kids, but like, and I think parents, like Justin's gonna have a new kindergartner and he's never seen this map test, like he doesn't know what's going on, and the first time you see it, it's really confusing and a lot of information comes at you, so even just for parents, like. One sheet, one chart, like this is
Can I
why
tell
we
you a
measure
funny
these
story?
things.
When Hannah and Isabel were in EEE at Bristol, my kids were in EEE at Bristol, and one of the days, I think they had to change the schedule for the preschoolers, or they had to change the hours because the building needed to be really quiet because the kids were doing the kneecaps, which is what it was called, the kneecap. At the time. Now I'm, a preschool parent, I had no idea. And I went home thinking they were measuring kids' kneecaps. I had no idea. What, what? I don't know, Brenda, they also have a different schedule tomorrow because they're measuring.
Is that part of like the vision testing and the like check for headlights?
Oh, no.
There must be something really amazing about kneecaps.
Whole child, Krista, whole child.
We got rid of.
Kneecaps included.
Oh,
I just don't know if there's a more abbreviated version that would also be helpful for community or parents. And maybe that already exists, I know.
Almost like an
every test comes
annotated
in
comprehensive
also,
assessment plan that.
but
Okay.
there's 1.5 million.
Anyway, that's what, that's what.
Well, let's-
Visioning is like one.
let's think about what this would mean to our schedule, whether we do 1 or 3. And setting aside to weave in the staff. We could find a 3rd meeting in a given month to do that, or we could extend a meeting. Whether we, start at 5:30 and end at 9 or something like that. I guess I'm interested in knowing because we have 2 meetings a month now. One's committees, which we're trying really hard to keep just to that, and then 1 full board meeting. Negotiations is going to start soon, and inevitably special meetings pop up. We also need to schedule a time to hear the report from the study team for safety and MTSS. And so, it's a lot to fit into our work plan. And one of the things I'm wondering is, do folks have an interest in, if we did 3 of these over the course of the year, then 3 months out of our year schedule, would it be better to have a 3rd meeting or a longer meeting? Like, you're already here, let's just make it longer.
So I heard something about 2, spring and fall, which sounds pretty attractive,
Okay.
and we're sort of used to long meetings, so I would hate to have a 3rd meeting. So either we have a light committee meeting 2 times a year,
Or a light business
Or,
meeting.
or a late business meeting.
What are other folks' reactions? Longer meeting versus an extra meeting? Is that what you just said? No. Is that what you said?
idea of cutting them both down to 2.
Yeah, because I was thinking too, that if we decrease it to 2, that might be more meaningful.
Yeah.
Oh, the number of the special
Yeah.
presentations,
Yeah.
okay. And then if we do that, what are people's feelings about, and so 2 times we have 2 months, we have 3 meetings versus 2 months, we have committee meeting and a longer board meeting.
I think there's gonna be more bandwidth in the committee schedule.
I would agree.
So do it on a night when there's a committee meeting. So committee meeting maybe gets shortened,
Yeah,
Or you lengthen the whole meeting.
or the length of the whole meeting, but put it
So
on
the
there
2-hour
instead of
meeting.
a
It's 3 hour,
business
you do
meeting.
an hour and a half each.
What do you think, Brad? You're muted still.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I'd rather sort of tack it on to an existing meeting than have another meeting. I'd rather have a longer meeting or maybe make some adjustments to either a committee meeting or a general meeting.
Okay. And those committee meetings do have more flexibility. It's a smaller group that can figure out their work accordingly. Okay. So, and then we need to figure out a time to have a follow-up with the study team. So maybe what we'll look at is one of our committee meeting dates coming up, if we're going with this theme of flexibility on committee meeting times.
I'm also curious about an update on Nate. We'll sort of keep banding that around.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, that's something we can add to a regular board meeting and ask Patrick to provide an update.
Okay.
And to add on today, just so that I don't lose that. So if we're gonna start committee meetings September 12th. And then the next one would be October 10th. And MAEA is just sort of waiting to hear from us, I think, on some possible dates for when we would get that report from Tracy. So I don't know what people think about trying to do that. Meeting with them on the 12th, maybe before committee meetings, or if we need more time to think about how your committee might be impacted. Yeah.
I think that, just thinking about the communication that came from, some folks from the Community Engagement Committee, I think we should consider putting those meetings first, as opposed to making them wait for when we're done.
Yeah. The committee meeting.
Yes.
Yeah, and in that case, we could always have our committee meeting a little earlier.
Yeah.
And so that way it's not too late
Right.
to have, because the other, yeah.
Wait, so which would go first?
Committee.
Oh, okay.
I mean, would that work for folks to have an earlier committee meeting on the
Then
12th?
there's like a hard stop
Exactly.
about
Right.
when then, so it would be like we would meet with the group at
5:30.
7, or our committee meeting maybe earlier, and then
Yeah,
this would take place at like 7.
yeah.
Yeah.
Does that seem,
So committees will go from when to when?
whenever you decide until 7?
Okay.
I mean, I think you just need to make sure to warn it, but I think community engagement committee right now is the only one that has active community members on the committee, so I think it might be more flexible
So that's for the 12th?
for the 12th.
Okay.
Does that work for folks?
Mhm.
Okay, all right, so then we'll get back and see if that works for an AEA on the 12th.
If not, would it make sense to offer the next month's committee meeting date as well? and say, here are the
Yeah,
two
9,
options?
12, or
Good
10,
to have
10.
two options up front.
Otherwise, there's month lag in between even putting out options, so.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Okay, so I think I have an idea of what we're doing with the curriculum instruction and assessment. And I think I know what we're doing for that. The only other thing on the board work plan that I just wanted to bring up was around the superintendent evaluation process. Right now, that's on the actual meeting that we traditionally have, where we meet with Patrick and review them in executive session. We review or John usually shares in advance with us, the tracking of all of the executive limitations monitoring reports, which is the basis for our superintendent evaluation. And that usually happens in our November meeting, and it's on the work plan in that format. But I know in years past, it's always been a little confusing, what the process is, how does it work? Is there an opportunity for the board to talk beforehand? And so I wanted to propose that at either our September or October board meeting, that we plug in a time to just review how we do the evaluation and what is used as the basis for that. And then then we can actually have the conversation
Yeah.
in November. So does that make sense?
I think that'd be really helpful.
Steve, I wondered if you might help with that conversation. Because, you know, really the purpose, the focus should be on the executive limitations policies and the evaluation process and the language and all that. So I feel like you're being part of that committee, it might be helpful.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll plug that in for October.
So can we do that is that something we do in executive session or do we do that?
Well, I was thinking that it would be great to talk about the process in the public meeting,
Okay,
so everybody's aware.
Yeah.
However, we did talk about whether the board might,
but not
we
specific.
don't ever really
about-
have time in we don't often have scheduled time in executive session without Patrick present. So if we wanted to, at that meeting, we could also do an executive session. If we wanted to talk about, like Dawn would write a letter
Mhm.
and then we would all review it, but maybe we want to have a conversation before I would draft that letter. So we could also do that at the October meeting
Okay,
in executive session.
okay. Yes.
Okay,
So do we need to approve this? Or do we
well,
wanna
I
wait?
think it can wait and
Okay.
we'll make the changes and approve it at the next meeting. Because we're gonna still follow it until then, but we can formally approve it in September. Okay, so now we have the policy C13, admission of non-resident students. So this is something that could go in the consent agenda. We did have the discussion, we did verbally agree to the policy with the amendments. But it has been a while, and in the interest of transparency, I suggested that we pull it out of the consent agenda just so that it has a little bit more light of day, but traditionally, this is something that would just, we've already gone over it, and really it lives within our administrators' work, and so it's not something that's our responsibility, but in any case, we need a motion to adopt that policy. And the copy is there with the edits that we proposed.
So moved.
A second.
And Kristen Todd. Okay, is there any discussion? All right, all in favor of adopting C13, admission of non-resident students, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Okay, the next item is to authorize me to sign a side letter with MAEA regarding a change to the support staff salary schedule. So we negotiated a salary schedule the last time we did support staff negotiations. This was agreed upon by both parties. And then as there was a discrepancy that maybe Patrick can explain a little bit more, which is the nature of this side letter that we need to create now to address that discrepancy. MAEA is fine with this. So we just need to approve it. Do you want to say anything about it? Anything
Yeah,
else?
so this is the first year sort of living with a newly created support staff salary schedule. Or maybe last year was the first year. Blending now.
This is,
This is year two.
We're in year 2 now.
Yeah, this is year two. But the concept of a salary schedule for support staff is still new in this negotiated agreement. One of the things we've learned is so we have some folks whose salaries were already beyond the top end of this salary schedule that was created, and they're sort of off grid or grandfathered. For the folks that are on grid, when we looked at what their hourly rate was before the grid was created. The grid was created, we made sure everybody got the minimum percent increase. I think it was a 4.75 or 5% or something like that. And that placed them on a step, but it was based on what their prior salary had been. Prior salaries are coming to us from pre-MAUSD when there were separate employers, no wage scale, so people were kind of all over the map in terms of where they were placed, given their relative experience. So now we took all these people that were all over the map and put them on the same grid, and we ended up with, I think an example was a 21-year experienced facilities person on step one with someone in their first year ever doing anything facilities related, making the same hourly rate.
Hmm.
So it didn't really pass the straight face test. The change here, which basically put bands of experience next to each of those 5 steps, makes it super clear, given your experience, what step do you land on and what your salary is. This side letter helps us address that issue that exists currently. Everybody wins in terms of, there's, I think, one person who with this is actually placed us 1 step higher than they should be. But with 1 more year experience, they end up in the right category. So we just sort of live with that one person being 1 step off for 1 year, and then that's corrected. And so it corrects everything as of now and prevents this issue from happening going forward. It is at a cost, I forget, 40-something thousand, I think is the net of taking, so the issue started with a facilities person noticing this discrepancy. I encourage the union to say, let's not just look at one person and try to fix that and not leave all these other problems that are also real and valid untouched. Let's fix them all, change the grid so it doesn't happen going forward, sort of bite the bullet, pay the money, and then we're in a good place. We actually have some really happy employees that some might get a $6,000 pay raise they didn't know was coming. And we're well positioned going forward. So they were very happy with that idea. And that's what you see before you, that you would authorize Krista to execute. And then we would make that pay adjustment retroactive to July 1st of the new fiscal year.
That, I guess that was the question when I read it, was where are we taking the hit? The 40 grand.
It'll be in this
This-
current,
this
it'll be this
current
FY
year.
24.
Okay. That's part of zeroing out things.
No.
We're zeroing out
Oh, this
FY
is
23.
coming budgets,
Yeah.
coming budget, I see.
And by coming budget, it's the one we're in right now since July 1st. We're in the new budget now.
Okay, yes, right.
So can I get a motion to authorize me to sign this side letter? No, we adopted the policy before. I don't. Justin, and a second?
It's fine.
Mike, I'm giving it to you.
Oh, I
I
love
think
it.
you've had a chance in a while, so it's all yours, my friend.
I'm a big fan.
Okay, any other discussion? All right, all those in favor of this motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great. Okay, so community engagement regarding the budget, we talked a little bit about this at the retreat, and we were trying to figure out if the focus was going to be on the vision initially. So, you know, recognizing that early on, we're looking to get input. And then later on in the process, we're looking to share information. And so we talked about that, and that October seemed a good time for the input part of the process, and that we might want to focus on bigger picture. We also heard the presentation from Patrick around his around the thoughts around vision. So what I'm wondering is if folks think it makes sense for the community engagement committee to think about that early part, and we could use the thought exchange tool. So it doesn't need to be a very complicated process, but we could gather some input from folks on their vision for the district. With the input that we get, we could then see if there are themes that arise and go back out again and ask folks, based on what we heard, how would you prioritize, or what are the things you value most out of what we heard from the community? That would be the beginning phase, the input phase, and then more closer to when we actually have numbers, that's when the finance committee would take over and think about how to let people know, based on that feedback and the information we have from our admin team and all the other things that we think about with the budget, that we would then, that group would be responsible for thinking about how to communicate that out to the public. What do you think, Sarah?
I like it.
Okay.
this is about the vision. I'm wondering if there's spots where things like, you know, central office or things like that, if that is totally out of the budget, or is that in the budget, and if those types of vision-y questions should be part of it. I'm only throwing that out there as
You
an
mean the location of
opportunity.
central office, or when you say central office, I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's a location.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, whether we get to that level of specificity.
Yeah, I don't know what your
Yeah.
goal is as far as vision goes, and that brings in the other committee. So I just wanted to
Right,
make sure if we're compartmentalizing it just to the budget, and the budget does not include any form of
That's okay.
facilities. If the budget includes how we're trying to allocate things towards facilities, or getting people's, like, I wanna say, well, their, you know, priorities, would you rather, be, extreme environmental stewards at the cost of doing less things, or like, I don't know if those are the kinds of visionary. I might have just opened a bigger
no, that's
thing.
great, because I mean, vision is a really vague word, and
Right.
it has to somehow be, I mean,
We only have
with-
so much money.
right, and with the thought exchange, I mean, we don't have to use thought exchange, we could use a different tool. The way that tool works is it's an open-ended
Right.
question. You can provide lots of background information to get people to that, and then get people to reflect on that. But I think it's a really good question. What do we want to know?
Right.
What measure of things do we want to know?
Yeah, and I think to Sarah's point is you could rapidly get into, well, how many teachers are there gonna be here next year? And
Right.
I mean, the conversation and based on some of the comment that we've had previous budget cycles, gets pretty detailed about those types of things. So, and thought exchange probably makes sense, but it would have to be well guided, so you aren't talking about, what you're gonna have for hot lunch on Thursday or whatever,
I actually just created a thought exchange for capturing some thoughts from educators that are all day together on Thursday of this week. And really it was about sort of vision for education in MAUSD. Not even necessarily specific about budget. And I think I'd rather, for me, as we're thinking about engaging our community around this shared vision of what it looks like and feels like to be in our schools. As soon as you enter budget, even that term into the conversation, you begin to restrict creativity and that sort of thought process. So I almost think the budget piece follows the more open, what's your vision for education in MAUSD? The budget is a tool. The budget is not the end, it's a means. And I think when we're talking about vision, we want to focus on the end and what people see as like, and even the way I've kind of crafted it with the staff, and we may, the structure is such that if the exchange that I'll be using with staff works, we could share that we have students do the exchange, we could have community do the exchange, and there's already a question in there to identify their role. And we can kind of sort out feedback from the same question from the different perspectives they bring. But the idea is like, I try to help people like literally go through this sort of imagery exercise to put themselves in a classroom. What does it look like? What does it sound like? What does it feel like to be in that room? How do the adults feel? How do the students feel? What's the community perception of this? So that's the sort of vision I want. I want sort of that. I want people as best they can to paint a picture with words of what it looks like and feels like to be in one of our schools in 5 or 10 years.
Folks good with that?
Sounds good.
Okay, thanks. I forgot that we had that part of the conversation, and I really liked the idea the first time we talked about that, and I like it now. I like it. I like also that we can do this with students too. And it's valuable information in so many ways, so. Okay, so I think we'll bring that to the community engagement committee and give them something else to chew on. We're gonna just roll that out as a thought exchange, I think, and
And I've structured the exchange to stay open through the month of September,
Okay,
so that I can do my thing with staff on Thursday, and then at any other point, once the school year rolls, the students can add, and at any other point, the community can add to that same exchange, so.
okay, awesome. All right, getting close to the end here. Okay, so then the only other things were the two items I added at the beginning of the meeting. Board highlight assignments. So today was a great example of a meeting where there's some really good updates that the public might be interested in hearing about. And for new folks that might not know, we have this document where, and we sort of fell off the practice of doing it toward the end of last year, but folks sign up to hit some of the highlights from the meeting, get that out on Front Porch Forum, and it just is a way a little bit beyond the minutes, although our minute taker does an awesome job, but it breathes a little life into some items that we can explain a little bit more in this format. I noticed that Liz is first up, but she's not here today, and the next person is Kevin.
You want me to do today? Is that what you're getting at?
Perhaps.
I can do-
What a good idea.
I can do that, assuming I don't have to do September.
No, you can flip. I'm gonna see if Liz will switch with you, if you're okay with that.
Yeah.
Great.
All I gotta do is remember. I'm glad I paid attention once you put on.
Well, I was taking notes, but I was watching to see how close you were paying attention because I knew I was gonna ask you. So if you need any more detail, let me know.
Okay.
Awesome. Okay.
And it's recorded, so. That's what.
So, and there's a template there, but if anybody is like, this is, I have a better way to do this, awesome, like Steve's had some great suggestions on what works and doesn't for Front Porch Forum.
Oh, so. I think I fell on my face the last time I did this, when I sent it to, so it's up to the person that does this. To get it out and all that kind of stuff, or is there an approval screening process before that?
Yeah, it should go to Aaron and I and Patrick before it goes out, just to give it a quick look.
And then Jennifer can help with the distribution, once it's ready, I think.
Excuse me?
Jennifer can help with the distribution.
Okay,
I don't remember where that usually goes.
I think it's
Front Porch
Front Porch
Forum.
Forum, the
Yeah, but
link
it's
for
like
the
start,
open
people
site.
like, will I have to then post it when it starts from?
That's what we've done.
Yeah, yes,
Well, so we
so,
have a couple of ways to do that. So I think we've been doing it that way because when it comes through Front Porch Forum from our account, it looks like it comes from me. And I think it was important that it came from board, which means we need somebody from each town to send it out.
so the process is I do this thing, I send it to you three.
Yeah.
And then I'm done, or do I need to turn around and send it out to the crowd?
yeah, then once we give it the okay, maybe if the person who wrote it, then just, no, I'll do that because I'll send it to the whole group and say we
Okay.
need volunteers to post to each town.
Good.
And Jennifer will take care of her part. All right.
So should it go to Jennifer as well?
No,
Not
no.
the draft. We
No,
can
it
send
doesn't.
it, once it's finalized, we can send it to Jennifer.
Okay. And then another example of a great way to contribute to the work of the board are monitoring reports. So people had signed up to do different reports, and I changed things around a little bit because we were trying to make sure that new board members had a veteran board member to partner with to complete their first report. And so I reordered some things. If you have any conflicts, let me know. And
Where's that list?
it's linked to the chair notes, and
Yeah,
it will
go to
be
the chair
moving
notes, there's a link.
forward. The board highlights. Assignments will always be on the agenda. And I suppose we can add this to the agenda, if that's helpful too, that it's always captured.
It is usually at the very bottom of the
Yeah,
agenda, where
usually.
it talks about the next meeting.
Who's the next?
Who's up
person?
next?
It usually gives a little heads up.
Okay, Kristen?
Just thinking ahead
Yeah.
for the monitoring reports, is there any way to add who did them last year, just so that it's all in one place, so that when the time comes. you
I
can
think-
say,
Jennifer
"Hey."
said she'd send stuff.
Yeah,
Okay,
so,
okay,
right, so Jennifer is really good at sending
Oh,
out
yeah.
the previous year, and I
Yes,
think
she
you can
is.
see who it was, and then you
Okay.
can just make a copy.
Perfect.
Okay, and Mike, I'll let Liz know that I've assigned her to help you, but don't
I can
hesitate.
also reach out to her.
Yeah. Okay. Um. Okay,
Can I ask just
Yeah.
a quick homework question?
mhm.
How? Where do I go to go read last year's version? Like, I think I would wanna read that sooner rather than later, so I'm,
Oh, so you don't want to wait till Jennifer?
You wanna
thank
wait-
you.
You wanna wait through the Google Drive,
You do.
boy.
Steve, poor Steve.
Go into
has been
Google
For years
and
trying to
in the
get us
search
to-
bar,
Yeah. There you go.
search, you can just type in 4.1.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, I can. Is that the
And
one
that will
I'm
bring up
doing?
First, you
Very
need to go to your.
You'll see it, then you'll get.
I'm in my Google Drive.
Yeah, so if you put 4.1 and you scroll down a little, you'll see the folder for 4.1, and when you open that up, you'll see for whatever one it is, and then you'll see all the previous years.
Okay. Oh, there's a folder for it.
Yeah,
Oh, piece of cake.
Go back as far
That
as
is the
you
best
want.
way to get there.
I think it
because
is,
Trying
the
to find
search.
through the folder tree.
which I'm
you
such a
feel-
creature of habit, and I always try to climb the tree.
Yeah.
And
I'm
I,
a searcher.
that's smart.
I
That's
don't
a
delete
way
emails.
more
I just
efficient
search
way.
them.
Tree
Yeah.
is a
I don't
good-
archive, I don't sort, I don't folder.
Okay, so we don't have any. Here, so let's get public comment. September meeting prep, I think we've talked about our work plan and agenda items. Can someone click on the link to open up the board evaluation?
Just
Yes,
F on the item that you added was just the discussion about the board monitoring side of the board. Okay,
Correct.
you said E then. Okay.
yep, so E was board highlights and F was just folks making sure that
Yeah.
they know they're signed up for.
Did we want to talk about? Plugging the mate presentation? or something?
Yeah, I put it on the work plan as items to add for future agenda.
Hmm.
And so it's next to August 22nd, and I think what Aaron and Patrick and I will do is try to figure out how heavy that. Well, why don't you tell me, I mean, where are you at in that work, and when would it
Yeah.
make sense to get an update?
I think it makes sense anytime. So Nate finished up with us late winter.
Oh, okay,
So I can share what the work we did together and some of the subsequent work since Nate and Carla and their support.
and you don't
left.
right now have any executive limitations monitoring reports, so. Could we just say
In
that?
August, that's
Yeah.
fine.
Right, this is tonight.
I'm not prepared for tonight.
Neither. are I.
Ready?
I can wing it.
We're doing pretty good right now.
Give you 5 minutes.
I am, yeah, I feel like it hasn't been summer, that's why I'm
Uh-huh.
thinking it's not
Seriously.
August. All right, would it be too big of a lift to? Or we can take
Yeah, we can, I don't know when our next meeting is, but
agenda.
sometime
planning.
pretty, the agenda planning meeting.
Okay, it will come up soon, how about that? Okay, meeting eval,
I'll do it.
thank you.
Okay, what is the level of engagement for all board members, high or low? I should say. High,
Mhm.
was the agenda followed?
Yes.
Added 2 items.
Does the chair effectively establish the agenda and materials for distribution to the board? The chair effective in fostering a professional culture regarding fair and open deliberation, full participation of all members, and ensuring the integrity of the board process.
Yes.
Other feedback? Comments? What went well with the meeting?
We're only 20 minutes late.
It says 6 to 9,
The-
40
What's
minutes
this?
early.
So we're 40 minutes.
I'm gonna keep
early.
saying 6 to 9, so that always will be done early.
I just talked to
I'm
Jennifer about
loving
changing it to
it.
6 to 8, because that's what we looking for, but maybe we gotta go back to 9.
I think 8:30 is like a really reasonable goal.
Yeah.
That works for me.
And if it's later, we are used to that, some of us.
I think really informative update.
Yeah.
Great
I would
updates,
agree.
discussions.
I want to keep our new one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
We don't wanna do 10 o'clock.
Yeah, 10:25.
Oh, there's.
Yeah.
That was your first one?
Yep,
Sorry.
yep, that was a.
I was like.
Sorry, it's actually better. Yeah,
And now it's like,
so you gave me a month of easy stuff, isn't that one?
yeah.
What suggestions do you have for ways to improve future meetings? That tonight was really
I don't know.
a great example
Yeah,
for
good.
a solid meeting.
This one.
Okay.
Right, no really hard decisions, please.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That
I was
helps
pretty
me.
excited that it didn't say executive sessions.
I know.
Only black and white. No gray.
okay.
We're good?
School start tomorrow?
Staff come back tomorrow, yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
my wife's back tomorrow.
We're gonna.
We'll get them. Yeah.
Tomorrow in their buildings,
Wish them
Thursday.
a
welcome
good start to
here.
the school
Yes,
year.
thank you. Yes.
We're
This
excited
was
to-
my last night of vacation, cause I go back on Thursday.
Yeah.
Wow. Spent it.
Wasn't it great?
Very much
Way to
looking
rip
forward
off
to
that
everybody
Band-Aid.
actually coming through the new lobby and all the bathrooms are done and
It's so
what
nice.
we were supposed to
Yeah.
have last year.
That's right. Yep.
Great. So with that, well wishes to a great new school year, can I have a motion to adjourn?
Yes.
So moved.
Sarah and Kristen seconded. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Hi.
Hi, everybody.
Hey.
Bye.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.